Hi, I'm Shelby Thompson, and this is my Module 5 Barriers to Web 2.0. I'm first going to start off with the summaries that we had to do for the readings. The first reading was Barriers to Using Web 2.0 in 21st Century Schools. The thing that stuck out to me the most were how technology is available, but it's not being integrated within instruction. And teachers are saying that they need more time, more training, and more administration support to be able to do those things. Something else that it also expanded upon was the digital divide and how home access versus no home access is widening that gap, including the digital divide and the achievement gap. I also found it interesting how it said affluent schools use it for problem solving while poorer schools are using it for drill and kill type practice. I I could be assuming here, but I think that reasoning for that is that those more affluent schools are getting the time and training and the administration support, so that way that they're using those things in the classroom. In that reading, they also talked about advantages and disadvantages of using Web 2.0. Obvious advantages are the collaboration and workforce skills and authentic audiences for student learning. And then disadvantages are things that I think we probably have all come into contact with. Social media addiction. I know that I get in moods where I can't, you have to break away from that. But also spamming and inappropriateness. Not just inappropriateness, I would also say like not using it, not staying focused while on it. I have a lot of my kids who'd rather go search YouTube than research what they're supposed to. So keeping them engaged and involved, and I think is important when we look at that. The next reading was the 7 common barriers that obstruct tech adoption. The one that stuck out to me the most was number 5. I didn't really think about it until I read that part about lacking the money to invest in technology and what is a higher priority. So schools do have money because they're funded, public schools anyway, because they're funded through the government. And so what is it that's higher priority that they're spending money on that isn't technology? And why isn't technology a priority within that district? So just some big questions there. Like maybe they're spending it on more food programs for their students because they have lower SES, or maybe they're using it for more test prep or assessment studies or things like that. Another one that kind of stuck out to me was number 2 as well, changing what a teacher's role should be. I think for some that is a big paradigm shift because it's taking the control away from a teacher. And I know us for teachers, sometimes we like predictability and control, and we think we know what learning looks like and engagement looks like, and that's quiet, sitting in your seat, doing what you're supposed to. But I think sometimes that's not always the case, and it should be more celebrated when a student can figure something out before a teacher does. And like that is a moment of where a teacher is learning alongside her students, and I think, or his students, and I think that is a great learning opportunity and encourages lifelong learning, not only for teachers but for students, because they see like, oh, even my teacher's still learning. And I think it brings relationships as well because it makes you more relatable. The next reading was The Digital Divide, a quarter of the a nation without broadband. I think sometimes we forget the rural places that don't have access to internet. Growing up in a small town, internet wasn't as fast as it was in the city. And that being a disadvantage for those rural parts. I think it was interesting how they talked about internet becoming maybe a public commodity, where just like internet or electricity has in the past. I also thought it was interesting how they talked about how more people have smartphones than broadband. And so to me, that was an interesting point. So why aren't we using that to our advantage as educators? Okay, they have a smartphone. they still have some kind of internet access. So how can we use that and utilize that in the classroom? Next was open educational resources. I had really never heard about open educational resources until now, and I think that it's awesome. I think as teachers, we naturally kind of beg, borrow, and steal ideas that we think are cool, but and that we can use in our classrooms. But I think it even just opens up the door to more of that and more of a space for units and curriculum alignment. And I love the fact that it was a living document and it was a hub for teacher collaboration. I think teachers do deserve recognition for their resources, just like a teacher pay teacher website. But I think there's like their resources are theirs, and I think they should be rewarded for those things. But if we can open those up and come together as an educational community, I think that it would make people's lives a lot easier. And then the last one was the ICT adoption barriers video. At the beginning of the video, when she says primary schools are more innovative than secondary, I kind of went, because as a secondary teacher, I was like, no. But it makes sense once she started explaining how primary schools are smaller and they interact with the same group of kids for the whole day, not just an hour-long basis or an hour and a half basis. And I liked that she brought in the culture of trust to be able to take risks. I think that's very true as well. I feel like if a teacher doesn't have the backing of maybe other teachers or their administration, then they aren't going to be willing to try those things in their classroom. Okay, and so now we're moving on to the questions. And the first question was about the digital divide. Do you feel the digital divide can be resolved? Why or why not? I think it can. Otherwise, I wouldn't be in education. I feel like most of us as educators want to make a difference and want better for our students. And I think that the digital divide is directly aligned with the achievement gap. So if we can bridge that digital divide, we'll be one step closer to bridging the achievement gap as well for our students in lower SES situations, and bridge the lines of race and poverty and ethnicity. And so I think that it's going to take a lot of people and a lot of resources to be able to do that. But I'm hopeful and an optimist and think that enough people are starting to put importance to it that it will become a shift in education. Okay, so what skill sets do I feel 21st century students must acquire before graduation? The first one, I think, is just basic technology literacy and typing. So many of my students type like this. If you can see that. They pick at it, okay? And then they see me type, and I'm typing how I learned in my typing class when I was in middle school, and they're like, wow, you type fast. And I think the sooner they can be exposed to that, the more efficient they will be using technology, and just using basic shortcuts like a Command Q or a Command P or things of those natures, so that way they get more acquainted with using technology. The next one would be problem solving. I think that students need to be able to figure out how to use a new technology tool on their own, or like be able to find out research or places where they can figure out how to use it. I think technology presents great problem solving opportunities for our students, and it pushes them to be able to think for themselves. I also think students should have a basic working knowledge of what code does and how it can be utilized. I myself need improvement in that area. I've used it some and I get how it works, but there's so many other cool things I think that we could be doing with coding in schools. Next, what impact has the global economy had on your personal use of the internet? I put the picture of Amazon on there because I think I probably get on Amazon every day, every other day, and it just makes life easier. I have our laundry soap and stuff like that set up through Amazon Prime, and it just ships it to my house. And then that's one less thing I have to worry about or do. So, my personal use of the internet, I would say that I use it for research. I use it to connect online digitally with other educators. But global economy, I think that it's making corporations bigger. And I think that sometimes is a dangerous thing, but it is also making people's lives easier, so less stressful, and they have more time. Or, like for myself, I have more time to do other activities that I find important. What technology training do I still need in my current position? After doing some readings, really think I need to use more VR. I just see a natural connection with teaching English where I could use it. They could build stories with it. They can um, go to different places and use their imagination. So much of imagination, I think, and creativity is suppressed. Nowadays, I think kids are trying to look for the right answer, and we're living in a world of gray. There's not a whole lot of black and white. And so I think when they get to use their creativity and imagination, then they're using those skills of learning about gray areas. Um, so that was just something. I think I just need some more training on like the Tinkercad program to be able to use more of those virtual reality simulators and things like that. Is your district equipped with 21st century technology? I would say that my district, compared to others, has put a great emphasis on technology. We're one-to-one iPads. We asked for a 3D printer, and they're like, sure. I don't use a textbook a whole lot in my classroom doing social studies. We have a robotics program where we have kids as young as third grade doing Lego robotics, and then we also have a high school class where they're learning VEX. I think that my district and leadership within my district has put an emphasis on technology, and so that's why we are using so much of it. Next, what are the advantages of innovative practices in schools? I think these are the top three, but there's so many more. Like, I think it's just deeper level thinking, employable skills, and lifelong curiosity of learning, which I think is so important for our students. I want them to be inquisitive. I want them to be curious and ask questions, and that leads to deeper level thinking. That's why I put the circles on here, because I think like all of these things are connected. Uh, More of our kids need to be able to think deeply and figure things out, and they'll become more employable. I think people who are filling jobs are ones who have high character and are willing to learn. And people always say, like, I can teach someone how to do something. I can't teach them how to be a better person or how to think. You can't teach someone how to think. So I think that those are great things that our kids need, and technology just lends itself to that. What are some disadvantages that I see? I see we could maybe have a growing dependency on technology. If the internet ever crashed and burned, and I think we'd all be, I don't know, it would be like an apocalyptic story probably, or something like that. But that growing dependency on technology, I think there still needs to be room for what would we do if we didn't have technology, that kind of thing. There could be a lack of penmanship practice. I know for some of my students, they would rather type than write because they don't like the actual physical writing of it, which I think is fine. But then they're also not practicing that penmanship and writing where they may need it with their handwriting skills or things like that. I also see the misuse of technology, like we've seen before on the other slide that I had before, the cyberbullying, spam, things of those natures, which I think if you have those conversations with your students and tell them, hey, that's probably not the way we should be using that, or we probably should be not, if you have conversations with your students about it, I think that the misuse is cut down exponentially. Have you experienced problems with cyberbullying or other inappropriate internet use with students? I would say for the most part, my problems that I face are my students staying on task. They usually like to look around and use YouTube and um, things like that. It's just trying to get them back on task. But I'm hoping next year I can use Apple's Classroom app and kind of monitor them more. It locks my students down into one app, and I can control from my iPad what they're seeing. So I think with that more control in some certain aspects when I need it, I think that'll cut down on my problems that I have, but I still want to have them time to explore and look for things on their own. I think it would just be given cases of repeated offenses where I would be more of a monitoring role when I first see problems arising. So that's my presentation. Thanks, guys. I did use Slides Carnival, and this was my first time using it, and it was a great resource. I just thought it was an awesome use for the slide theme. Thanks again.